It's time for the movie rating. Tonight we're going to go behind the scenes of George Romero's Day of the Dead with special effects makeup artist Mr. Howard Berger. Hello.
Hey, how are you, Mike?
Fantastic, man. Now, for starters, like when arriving on the location, can you describe how you had to actually prepare the first stage of things? And were there ever any like discussions between Savini, you, or even Greg on the direction of like what kind of zombies or the concept or anything like that? I mean, where were you put in place with all this happening?
Okay, I was one of the many. So I was 19 years old. So I was a kid. Basically, this was my very first location job because I was born and raised in California, and I just was working in LA, doing this for a short period. This is in 1984. They had already been prepping. Tom and Greg and Dave Kinlan and John Vulich. Those guys were already prepping the show at Tom's house in his shop downstairs. And so when it came time to film, Tom decided he was going to let two people go, and he wanted to hire two new people. So John Vulich, who was a great friend and kind of was the art director on the show. I mean, he came up with the whole look of the zombies with Tom. He said, well, I have two friends, Howard Berger and Everett Burrell, and they'd be great. So can we bring them out? And Tom said, yeah, bring them out. So we got the call, and Everett and I packed up, and we hopped a plane to Pittsburgh, and we were both super excited because neither of us had ever been on location, yet alone. We're going out there to work for Tom Savini on a George Romero zombie movie, the third installment of the Dead series. So, I mean, really, what more can you ask for? I was 19, Everett was 18, Greg was like 20, and Greg was already there working, because he's from Pittsburgh. So anyhow, we land, and I get off the plane, and Everett and I go to the limestone mine where they're shooting, in Beaver Valley Falls or what have you. And the first person I meet is Greg Nicotero. Greg walks past. He's like, "Hey guys, I'm Greg Nicotero." And then the next person is Savini. And he runs past. He's like, "I'll be right back." We're ushered into the effects room, which is within the complex that we're shooting in. That was also the set, the hallways and all that. And John Vulich was there, and we met Dave Kinlan, and we met Mike Tursick, so it was really exciting, and it was super fun. And again, John Vulich led the way. So, that all the design and concept and colors, that was already picked, So, like, we were just coming in as hired guns and applying makeups. And, like, my first makeup that they handed me was beef treats. And I was like, wow. And John had established it, but my first day on the job, they're like, "Oh, you do that guy for now on for the rest of the show." I'm like, okay, I'll do beef treats, and then a whole bunch of other ones. I never talked to George, with the exception of like, "Good morning, George." And all conversations went through Savini, of course, and then Greg was there as Tom's assistant. I really took my marching orders between Savini and John Vulich. A great adventure because, again, it was the first location I'd ever done. So to me, this was my college years, because I had gone from high school right into the film industry, working for like Stan Winston and Rick Baker and John Buechler and so forth and so on. And this was so exciting to me. What we thought was a fortune, we got paid $300 a week. And we're like, this is great. We're making so much money. It was $300 a week flat. We were just so happy to be there and with our friends and colleagues and, lifelong friends. So it was a great experience, man, and it really was a great way to be introduced to location, and getting to work with Tom Savini was outstanding. And of course, I now have a lifelong friendship with Greg Nicotero, as we've had K&B Effects Group for the last 38 years. It's been crazy, but it was a very important film in my life and in my career.
Now, how long of the process, like as far as the zombies go, how many zombies did you actually do? Now, one of them was Jeff Monahan that played AKA Broccoli Zombie, but there was so many zombies that you had to work with. Now, how long did it take on the process of that, and did you get to actually personally choose that type of materials to actually create the zombie? Because I know you had a little bit of your own touch with Broccoli Zombie, at least.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, it's like, again, John Vulich was like, we're going to do this guy, this guy, this guy. And I'm like, oh, maybe, for the makeup I did on Jeff, the Broccoli guy, I just took a bunch of generic appliances that we had and kind of like, okay, this is cool, and then I'm going to put some of this cool lichen on them, and that's where the whole broccoli guy came from. Is that he has all that green, like leafy shit on him, and I think I just started calling him Broccoli Zombie or something. But I mean, we did tons of makeups, all of us, all day long, doing prosthetic makeups. It was nonstop, and the way that Greg and Savini had broken it down, there was like A, B, and C group. So like our A group were like all our hero prosthetic makeups, and then B was like a little bit less, and then C literally was like streaks and tips. So we had a couple of the guys standing there like spray painting our background, like hands and faces, and just like standard like paint makeups. We had this one room that was our makeup room and also our workshop, and that's where we would make people up all day long. We all got to have fun. Like John Volich plays the shovel head zombie, that gets the shovel, chopped his head off and all that stuff. And so I got to do that makeup. Johnny came to me. He's like, listen, why don't you do my makeup? You're really good with color, and you do my makeup. So I applied his makeup and all that stuff. And it was just a big barrage of everything. It wasn't like this character's mine. I can't claim any of those. They're all Savini's, and I'm all working for Tom Savini. All of us were. So it was just like one makeup after another. We would, I don't know, maybe do 10, 15 makeups each a day. It just, and we would have about an hour, maybe hour and a half to do a makeup, depending on it. I mean, I'm a fast makeup artist, and I was able to knock stuff out. I could do a makeup in an hour or so, and that's how it all kind of went down.
Now, you mentioned as far as being a zombie, you were the quote spin around zombie in the cave scene, along with the shovel zombie, and being a zombie, like, was that planned as well, or was that like a test for that squib effects? And can you describe like the as far as the actual effects and makeup effects process? How did that scene work out, and how many takes did that take? Was that like a one take and then let's move on to the next?
Oh yeah, that was. Oh no, dude, that was a oneer. So all the effects were pretty much oneers. So because we had so much to do every day, so everybody got to be a zombie. Greg is like 27 zombies in the show. So because we'd always make Greg up some way or another. He was great he was like the Mr. Potato Head. So we could make Greg up in different things, especially when we did gags, because he knew how to do the gags. So he never grabbed this the wrong way or pull Tasso's head off the wrong way. He was great at it. So Tom would always enlist Greg to be a zombie and all that. And I got to be the zombie, I guess, as you said, the spin around zombie. And Tom did that makeup, and he put a squib on my head, and it was we called my zombie the Zinger zombie because the squib that Tom put on my head looked like a zinger, like a zinger, Hostess zinger pastry, and it was so big, and I was like, geez, I hope my head doesn't blow off. And the squib was so loud, my ears are still ringing today, I think. I was like deaf for like a whole day and a half after that. Tom put such a powerful squib on my head, it probably shook my brain. But that was a oneer. I got in, I did my thing, spun around, boom. And Tom's great at gags, as we all know. And so every gag he did worked beautifully, and that was one of them. But boy, oh boy, I could not hear anything for like a day and a half. Probably could have gone half that size. Yeah, when Tom was rigging squibs, we knew it was going to be powerful. So, but yeah, that was just, I was one of the many zombies that day, because that was towards the end of the shoot, and we had to finish up, and it was after Christmas. We shot December, or we shot January, and it was kind of wrapped up around February. There was a day of let's just get everybody in there that's a zombie. Everybody got to be a zombie. Like Mike Tursick was the gut zombie, whose guts spill out, and then Dr. Logan drills him in the head with a Dremel, and then like I said, Greg was a whole bunch of zombies, and I was a zombie. Dave Kinlan was the priest zombie. Johnny Volich was the chop zombie. Everett was a zombie. I think he was like one or two zombies, and the only one who wasn't a zombie was Savini. He didn't want to go into makeup because he hates it. He likes to do the makeup. He doesn't want to wear the makeup, and I completely understand and sympathize with him, because I'm the same way now. I'm like, I don't want to put makeup on myself. I hate it even when there's blood on me. I'm like, ugh, I just don't like the way it feels anymore. So we just like to do the work. We don't want to be the work, if that makes sense.
How many areas, as far as doing all the makeups, because there's also the testing as well, as far as camera work and the makeups too, and putting appliances and whatnot. Like, how many areas did you actually have to utilize, or did you actually use the entire facility to create all the makeup for the zombies?
Well, everything was prepped at Tom's house. That was before I got here. So that's where all the sculpting, mold making, blah, blah, blah happened. We had one big room, That's where we did all the makeups, and that's where we prepped everything. It was, it was a good sized room that we had inside the complex, and there was a costume shop next door, and there was another shop, and so on and so on. Different, we were all in this complex in the mine, and then that's also where we filmed. Like, all the stuff down the hallways and all this. It was all very contained, as I recall. We built stuff inside, like when we were building Dr. Tongue, all the sculpting and mold work had been done, but we assembled it all inside that room, and Tom did all the finishing work on it, all the cleanup and gluing the skins down, and then John Vulich painted it, and I think Everett Burrell did the hair work maybe, or Tom did the hair work, but stuff like that. So we did all the finishing stuff in that room, as well as doing all the makeups.
Now let's do a quick little of the breakdown, like where every zombie has been. Like, was each scene choreographed pretty well? Like, I mean, there's so many people in one area. Like, was that a smooth rotation of all these zombies, including yourself, and having get everything in motion like that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean, there's a process. You go in the morning, you go early morning. We all drove together, and we'd go in. It was dark out, and we'd go into the mine, and we'd have our characters. So, like I was saying, we did A, B, C groups. A's came to us. Sometimes B's came to us, and C's went elsewhere down the road, or in another room. As you do on any movie, you basically have a flow to how you're doing it. It's like, well, this guy's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and you just get everybody through the sausage works. They go in one end and they come out the other end, finished, and that's really it. And then when we went to set, John Harrison was the first AD as well as the composer of this movie, and it was just organized that this is what we're shooting and this is what the zombies are going to do, and so on and so forth. So and those ABC groups were stacked so that we only had A-looking zombies up front, and then it backed up from there. And the C zombies were just kind of filler, just so it felt like there was a lot of them. But we never wanted to photograph them in any sort of close-up because they were very rudimentary paint makeups. That went on for months. That's how we orchestrated it. And then at the end of the day, we'd get back in our car and drive out, and it was dark. So we never, ever saw sunlight for the entire shoot because we would wake up so early to go to work and then leave so late. So as far as we knew, it was dark all the time. And then, of course, inside the mine, there's no sunlight, so it's pretty dark and creepy and what have you in there.
What was really the most complex makeup for you? Like, exactly how many zombies would you consider was the most complex that took the longest, and what would you say that was actually pretty easy but looks complicated?
I have to say they're all the same. There wasn't anything that was complex for me or any of us. They're really simple makeups. It's just like what we call like Lone Ranger pieces, which are just kind of like around the orbit of the eyes. So everybody had about an hour or so to do a makeup, as I recall. I mean, probably the most complicated makeup that John Vulich did was Bub. And Bub was beautiful makeup on Howard Sherman. And that was a makeup that Johnny sculpted and molded and applied and pre-painted. It was all one piece, which was incredible. It was all foam rubber. Everything on the show was foam rubber. But no, the makeups were pretty straightforward. There wasn't anything where I'm like, this is complicated. Like I said, Bub was probably the most complicated, but it was also the most featured and most important of all the zombies in the entire film. I mean, we had gags like I said, Mike Tursick. Everett Burrell and I did that makeup and did the face, and then did Mike's body and all that stuff with the hollowed out rib cage so that the guts can spill on the floor, stuff like that. But it was all pretty straightforward. It was just a lot of fun doing a bunch of zombie makeups every day.
Now, the budget itself for this film was very tight, and as well as the actual filming schedule was very tight. Basically, everything on this was very tight. And as far as the materials go on the makeup and effects, were there moments that you actually had to substitute material if you actually did run low on that same material?
No, not at all, because it was foam rubber. So we were just always running foam rubber. We had a little area where there was an oven, and that's where we would mix the foam rubber to make the appliances. So no, we were all fine. And I think Tom had a rather healthy budget. I don't know what it was. It certainly was enough to do what we needed to do every day and do, X amount of zombies. So I think what makes it all different is just the design and the look of the zombies, which make it unique. And, and especially if you're looking at the universe of, the Dead movies, there's really nothing in the first film in Night of the Living Dead. And then for the most part, it's a lot of paint stuff, a lot of blue guys in the second film. And then this one was really heightened with, prosthetics and character makeups and things like that. Our department, from what I could gather, never had a financial issue or anything that had some sort of issue about materials we were using.
Was that also ever discussed between you and the team as well as like how much could you actually, I mean, was there ever an actual allowance of like how much could you use and if you went over or whatever, or did you pretty much kind of scaled it down as like, okay, we're going to do this, and it was like everything was pretty much pre-planned out on everything on that?
Yeah, I think everything was planned out, but I mean, none of that stuff really pertained to us. If there was like limitations or anything, that would just be Tom, because that was his show and we were just working for him. They don't discuss things like that with us. We never felt any sort of pinching or anything like that. And, the fact that we were able to do puppets like Dr. Tongue and, a couple other things. And, this was all new for Savini as well. Like, he had never done things like this, of this scale. So, and never had a big crew. This is the biggest crew he had ever had. Prior to that, it was like him and one other person usually. Yeah, I think for him, it was like, all bets are off and let's do all the cool stuff we can come up with. And there were no limitations as far as I felt in our universe, so it worked out great.
As far as like the scene where Miguel, the dream sequence per se, when he leans over and all that, how long a process did that actually take? How many people actually worked on that per se? I know that, is that like a major one piece and then you had all the little inner workings? I mean, what was the process of that for you guys to work on that?
John Vulich did that makeup and he sculpted all that stuff, and it's a 2-piece appliance, same with the thing we did on Mike Tersic. So first applied, Johnny sculpted, or I think actually Mike Tersic sculpted the rib cage stuff, had a rib cage and interior, and that glued down first on Tim, the actor, and then there was a skin layer that glued on that and was blended off and painted, and then that was scored, with the slice, and then Tom put the guts in. And back then you used real guts. We don't use real guts today, but back then we used real guts, which were kind of like, that was one of the things Greg was responsible for, and we called him Gut Boy, which I don't think he liked. Greg handled all the real guts and organs and all that shit. So Tim's laying on his back and the makeup's applied, and Tom or Greg puts the guts in, and then on cue, on action, Tim sits up and all the guts spill out everywhere, and a great gag. It looks wonderful. It was like a maybe 2-hour makeup. So I recall he handled the whole thing, I think, and then Tom was there to finish doing all the dressing and stuff like that with Greg.
Talked about where the Joe Pilato scene where he has to get all his guts ripped out, like as he said previously, like ripped up basically a pizza, and those guts weren't exactly fresh. They were actually in a broken down ice box that wasn't really well ventilated, and they had the whole facility smelled like rotten guts. I mean, who was actually really responsible for that by that little mishap? I mean, even Joe Pilato, God bless him for sticking around with that, having to hold his nose, and everyone's trying to fan it out. Could you describe a little bit, like, if you were even there, like that process of how did they had to like really handle that? I mean, was it like every second with those guts out?
No, it was fucking gross. What happened is that, we had purchased guts. We had refrigerators there, and the guts were put in there for storage. And we had Christmas break, and we didn't know the power was going to be shut off during Christmas. Aha, there you go. So when we came back, the first thing up was Joe getting ripped in half. And Greg went and opened the fridge, and the fridges were off, and the stuff stunk like nobody's business. It was basically rotting, deteriorating, decomposing flesh. So we didn't have time to get new guts. So Greg got a bunch of bleach, put all the guts into the bleach, and just soaked them in the bleach in hopes that it would kill all the bacteria and whatever else was going on. But nonetheless, it still smelled horribly because it was rotting organic matter. And so we did the best we could. The only guy who couldn't wear a mask during that, because we were all wearing masks because it smelled so bad, was poor Joe, and of course the zombies that were there. But you've seen the behind-the-scene video when, it's 1, 2, 3, and we pull them apart, and blood and all this shit's going on, and then the guts come out, and they go cut, and Joe is just about to puke. And it's because they smelled, there was rotting flesh. That's all there is to it. It's like a dead body, like a really, really dead body. So yeah, again, that would never happen today, but it happened then just because it was such a crazy wild, wild west sort of thing. But Joe was a great sport about it. It's like I rigged that body and put all the nurnies together and all the blood tubing, and I was behind the wall pumping all the blood during the scene. I couldn't see anything. I just hear Tom like, pump, more blood, and just pumping and pumping and pumping all this blood, everywhere. It's an iconic scene. And Joe didn't tell anybody what he was going to say, with the exception of George. He had whispered, and George like, "I'm going to say choke on them," and George was like, "That sounds great." So that was all new to us, and we are like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. Why not? Hopefully the zombies will choke on them." Although the zombies are already dead, so even if they choked on the guts, they wouldn't die. And nonetheless, and that was towards the end of the shoot, so it was a fun way to end the shoot, and a good way to kill Rhodes, who's a pretty nasty character in the show. Yeah, I mean, we just kept doing effects like that through the course of the film that Tom designed and John Volich, helped build and all that stuff. And it was a great opportunity because we got to do things we'd never done before and got to help elevate the effects and the looks of everything in the Dead series. So
as far as the effects go and the makeup on like Miguel has quite a few areas as far as a focal point and being mutilated. I mean, he gets torn up, he gets the dream sequence, and then he also gets his arm taken off. So if you can, tell us a little bit about where Miguel, he does get bit, and then they basically chop off his arm, like the process of like how did that affect work? I mean, was that also a one type thing? Because I mean, as far as how his arm was moving and how to get that blood going, I mean, can you describe that?
Well, Tom is the master of misdirection, because he's a magician as well. So I mean, if you look at how that works, first is Miguel gets bit, so that was a double layered appliance. A zombie grabs his arm, Now it was actually Dave Kinlan played that zombie, and bites and pulls out all this chunky stuff. Blood's pouring out, and then they get Miguel on the ground, and then the hatchet comes down, which was a fake arm we built of Tim, and Tom had hogged out a section and replaced it with wax. So it goes thump, and then we cut to Miguel, the actor, on the ground with a wedged out knife, which is one of the cool things Tom came up with, and that's on his arm, and that's where you see the hand moving, because that's Tim's actual hand moving with the fake knife. And then the final thing is 1, 2, 3, cut, and he cuts through it. So that was the blade with a fake arm, and Tim's arm was behind his back with a stump. And then of course they burned the stump. That's how it all went down. We shot it all in one day. Shot it all, like I remember maybe it was one of the first things of the day, and so we shot that, and then Tim's got his stumpy arm the rest of the show, and then at the end of the movie he gets his neck bit, and again that was like a double layer appliance, and the people we had doing the bites were all of us, were the makeup effects guys, because we knew how the gags worked. And we didn't want, like some of the background extras to do it, and it didn't quite work, and we kind of foil it, like we just. Monster makers make the best monsters, and Tom knew that, and so did George. So we were all involved with being zombies and biting people as often as we could. That's how Tom did the Miguel arm chop thing.
Logan's scenes, Mr. Or AKA Frankenstein, like was the scene with the zombie reaching up where basically Bub's first introduction was in the walkway, and we see the main role coming in, and then the zombie kind of tilts over to on the gurney where his basically guts is basically halfway out too, but then Logan basically has to put a drill through his head. Can you describe a little bit? Was that a one piece as well for that, or was that a little bit more different?
No, well, that's the same thing as the Miguel thing. So like I was saying earlier, that's Mike Tursick, who was on the crew, and Mike played that zombie, and Everett Burrell and I applied that makeup. So no, it's again a double thing. So we have Mike on the table. He's in a full prosthetic makeup on his face and neck and all that stuff. And then we had the whole rib and interior stomach, and then there was another skin layer that went over that, and we put all the guts into that, so when Mike reaches up, his guts spill out on the floor. So yeah, that was very similar to how they did the Miguel sequence. So same process, basically. Cool makeup. And then the drill, when they drill into Mike's head, the drill was rigged with a bloodline, so there wasn't a bloodline in Mike's head. It was the drill was pumping blood, which is another Savini sleight of hand sort of trick that Tom likes to do, and puts the blood into the weapon opposed to into the person. So it worked out really well. It's a great gag, really. And there was a couple times, because it was a retractable drill bit, and one or two times Mike didn't feel it, so like it's cutting into his head and blood squirting out, and then he's just sitting there, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't feel it," on his forehead. So there's a couple takes they have where Mike just didn't feel the drill bit going into his head because there wasn't a lot of pressure on his head. After the gag was over, he was still sitting up, and just kind of looking around like, oh shit, I didn't fall down. So then we shoot it again and just give Mike a cue like, and fall. And then he would know that the drill bit was out of his head.
And the other scene is where Major Cooper, who passed away, whatever reason that you want to
Right.
come up with on that, where he's sitting on the table and they actually use an actual person underneath that table for part of the
Right.
effect. I mean, could you describe like how, as far as making the movements, because they had to give him cues to, hey, left arm, right arm, as far as
Right,
do that, because
right.
the guy couldn't see it. Could you describe that process of like how long did that actually take on that scene? Was that also quick too?
Everything was quick, but I mean, that was another guy from our team. His name's Barry Gress, who's passed away. And Barry volunteered to play that character, which we called Moose Clit, a John Volich sculpture. And Barry had his head in a hole and recessed, and his head was actually like leaning backwards so that you didn't see it. It was like on a slant board, but instead of his body being slanted, his head and neck were slanted out of the frame. And of course, he got dizzy after a while because all the blood was rushing to his head, so we didn't think about that. But Barry was a trooper. He had this makeup that John applied, and which was the cut open head and with the brain sitting there with the electrodes and all that stuff, and just did whatever. Obviously, he's told like, raise your hand here, do this, do that, and he's the corpse is mimicking it. So, but yeah, I mean, that was a makeup that Johnny did as well, and probably was like another 2-hour makeup or something like that. It's pretty simple stuff, but really, really effective. And again, it's that whole sleight of hand magic trick stuff. And all Tom Savini's effects are always that. There's something that's magic based, with the way he approaches things, which that's what makes it so unique and so cool. Be it shot in reverse or a weapon that's been wedged out, he's always misdirecting your vision. So he's able to pull this out of a hat while you're looking at this. So that's the magic of Tom Savini's work, in my opinion.
And now we also have the invasion of the zombies, the process on that one.
We had Ralph, and he was in a makeup that, so we could pull his eye out and rip the skin away. And then also Mike Tursick sculpted some fingers, that could be bitten off. Again, there's nothing like nothing innovative. I mean, I don't want to say it's not innovative. It is. It's cool. It's the way it's being used, but it's pretty much all pretty straightforward stuff. Between Gary Clark getting bitten on the neck, and Rickles, getting his face ripped off and all that. And Johnny Volich, I sculpted that makeup on Ralph, and then Johnny applied it, and it looked funny in real life. Looked like he was Quasimodo, but the way that Mike Gornick shot it worked really well, and you see the tearing and all, and that's all Greg too. That's Greg's hands in there tearing away at Ralph, and then one of the other crew guys bites his fingers off and all that stuff. A straightforward way we go about doing makeup effects. So, I mean, it's appliances with blood rigs and blood bladders, and you put them on the actor, you bite them, you pump the blood. That's pretty much all the stuff that's in the movie, is those sort of gags.
If you had a full say on certain things on the effects on your side, would you actually do different to make the story? Would you say this story does very well for its own effects?
This is Tom Savini's show. It's not my show. It's not a K&B show. It's not a Greg show, whatever. So I was more than happy to do whatever was asked. There wasn't a point where I looked back and went, oh, well, I wish we did it this way. Everything went the way it was supposed to, and everything went the way Tom designed it. And George utilized it properly, which that in itself is an amazing thing, because nowadays you have directors who misuse all your stuff, and you're like, what the hell? But George knew how to use stuff. He knew how to utilize what Tom gave him to tell the story, and that's the most important part of it, is telling the story. And what we bring to the table helps tell that story. You don't want the movie to stop and go, everybody look at the effect, and then resume the movie, because then we don't do our job, because it doesn't kind of integrate into the storytelling. And George was really a master at that. He could have all this fantastic stuff in his movies, and it never stopped the film. You just kept watching it, and it was just part of the storytelling. I mean, I loved the movie when I saw it. I thought it was great. I haven't seen it for a really long time, so I couldn't say now what I think. Last time I saw it was at a screening Greg and I went to at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. George was there. It was the last time we saw George. And it was great. It was great to see it again. And Pilato was there as well, and they were all there up there talking after the movie. It was fun. It was a good little reunion, But it's a good movie. It's a movie I'm proud of that I worked on it, and I was very lucky to get the opportunity to be hired to work on the film with Savini. So yeah, it was great. Plus, George has a certain underlying social commentary in his movies, especially with these films, I think it's a great blend. I don't think you need to show everything. That's the thing. It's like you can be subtle. There's something to be said about subtlety, and I really appreciate it, and I think it works really, really well. That's kind of comes across. There's just enough stuff that needs to be there. It's not gluttonous. It's not like one thing after another, or showing it like this or showing it like that. It's just the right amount, and that's why people love those movies, because they're fun, they're scary, there's some gross stuff in it, but it delivers everything it says it's going to deliver. And Day of the Dead, it was a great roundup, that trilogy.
I think like today's like zombie films and even horror in comparison what Day of the Dead brought to the table, do you feel like that is radically changed? And like did that change your view a little bit, like how you see it today and compare what you worked on Day of the Dead?
Well, I think when I worked on it, I was just excited to be working on a zombie movie, so I wasn't thinking like anything outside of that, to tell the truth. I haven't seen it for a while, like literally probably, I don't know, 15 years, maybe even more. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like, because we're involved with Walking Dead, and that's cool. And there's a lot of, the first couple seasons are really outstanding in storytelling. For me, it's all about the storytelling. If the story isn't good, then it doesn't matter about. Then I really am not interested in seeing it. And it's not that I'm a avid zombie fan, and I'm not. I like zombie stuff. I think I've seen one Resident Evil movie, and that was it. I just like to see good films, and I think that those Dead movies are really good. And whatever people want to now make films and whatever commentary they decide to put in, that's perfectly fine. But George had commentary as well. The first movie is about the social climate of racism, and the second one is about consumerism, and I think this last one, Day of the Dead, is more about the military aspect of the world. So George made movies that had underlying commentary and what his beliefs were. So it's not just films about the dead walking around and eating everybody, although that can be taken from that as well. It's deeper than that, especially Night of the Living Dead. If you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead for a while, that's a movie you should watch, because it's really fantastic. It's well made, and it really has a lot of social relevance. It's really just a really great film. It's one of my favorite Romero movies.
Would you like to care to give a couple awesome memories?
See, I mean, the whole show for me was wonderful. And, we shot 6 days a week, and it was super busy, and we got to do great stuff, and I was with really wonderful people. So it was an incredibly positive experience, and stays one of my favorite. It's right up there with Dusk Till Dawn and Evil Dead 2, and films like that really, really were special, to me. And Tom's a big practical joker. So things Tom likes to do or did is like, you'd be sitting there working, and then unbeknownst to you, Tom has crawled across the floor, put gunpowder under your chair, put a igniter into that gunpowder under your chair, then crawled back to his space, plugged in the igniter into his detonator box, and then he would call your name, like, Howard, and I go, yeah, and he would hit the button, and there'd be an enormous explosion, and the whole place would shake. And at times they thought that the place was caving in. That's how loud the explosion was. But Tom took great joy out of blowing people up, even though it was kind of dangerous. There was a lot of times where we were just having fights, like play fights, but in the room in between things, and we would use weapons, and people would get hurt, and they'd have to go to the emergency room. Or Tom would, have a bullwhip and whip people, just showing, because he's a master bullwhip guy. Or, Tom has swords, like foils, and he would take the tip off, and you'd end up getting sliced up. And we all of us ended up going to the emergency hospital at least once or twice, because of Savini. But we also wear those memories very fondly in our hearts, because working with Tom could be life-threatening at sometimes, but it always was rewarding and super fun. So I always think about all the fun times we had, and all the hilarity and jokes and practical jokes that Savini liked to play, and we would play on Savini. And it was just a big happy family. It was a very straightforward shoot with really good people, and all worked together, because George had his team, and they all worked together since Night of the Living Dead. I mean, we even had Vince, one of the actors in Night of the Living Dead, come, and he was a zombie in Day of the Dead, and that was really cool meeting him, because I'm like, oh, you're the guy at the end, who's out there as one of the hunters in the credit sequence. So it was fun. It was really good, and a lot of celebrities, obviously, like Laurie's father, Chili Billy. came to visit, and that was a big thing for all of us that are fans of Night of the Living Dead and all the cool stuff they did in Pittsburgh prior. So yeah, no, it was great. Everything was great. It was just a blast, and they just don't make movies like that anymore. But there's a reason why that film feels the way it is, being made in the early '80s, and using real guts and bunch of other crazy stuff through the course of it. You just don't do things like that anymore. It's kind of taboo, but I'm sure glad I got to experience it, because they're great memories that I'll always have about those films.
It's time for the movie raid, and tonight we go behind the screams with actor Joe Pilato, played in George Romero's Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. Hello.
Behind the scream. I love it when people scream, especially after I shot them in the head. Dead. So what do we got happen now behind the scream?
Well, first let's go a little bit of a venture in Dawn of the Dead, because you had what appears to be in the theatrical version of Dawn of the Dead, that you had a very, very tiny scene, but you actually had a role in the uncut version. The extended.
Anybody that wants to find it, you can find it. Dario Argento has, it's called The Black Box. Dario loves George's work so much, he has 3 different versions of Dawn of the Dead in something called The Black Box, and you can see my full scene in its entirety. I was a little disappointed that I didn't make the American cut when it first came out, but thanks to the Italian, I say that because I am one, Dario Argento, you guys can get to see the full-blown scene behind the screen.
Yeah, and your character in that film, you're a cop. Due to circumstances of the zombie apocalypse, you became a looter.
I was kind of, if I was a cop in St. Louis today, I probably would be on trial for something. Yeah, I definitely became a soldier of fortune. Turned in my badge and became a soldier of fortune.
So now we're fast forward back to Day of the Dead. So where was this located, and how long did you stay as far as filming?
It was shot in Wampum, PA, Elwood City, PA, very small towns, in an underground mine that was used to, at one point in time during the Cold War, to store certain sensitive documents affecting the state of Pennsylvania, and then it became a place where people would store their recreational vehicles or boat for the winter. And 3-4 miles long, if you went off the beaten track and got lost, you'd be lucky if somebody found you. We'd show up for work every day, pitch black in the morning, and we'd enter the mine, and there'd be golf carts there, 2 miles deep into the mine, where the pretty much the permanent set for the movie was. And it was cold. It's a witch's pit.
So everything was still there when you got there, including like the old military boxes, ammo boxes, and some vehicle parts and stuff?
No, but at that time, by that time, all that stuff had been either sent somewhere else or destroyed. I have no idea. Mostly it then became a storage facility for recreational vehicles.
What about the silo scene? Wasn't that part of that too, or was that separate?
Well, that was an actual abandoned Nike base. I can't remember the exact city, but that was not part of the mine, although in the film it looks as though it is the top of the mine, and that's how the zombies got to come down that elevator. But that was an actual Nike base in and around Wampum, Elwood City. I don't know the exact, I can't remember the exact location, but there is a book coming out actually this week written by a guy named Lee Carr, which is day-by-day accounting of the entire shoot of Day of the Dead. I believe it's called Day of the Dead. I don't know if it has a subtitle or anything like that, but the gentleman's name is Lee Carr. Can't remember if it's C or K, but you can look that up because I saw him at a horror convention in Pittsburgh last week, and he told me actually 10 days ago, and he said that the book was due to come out this week. I guess check with Amazon or find out, and that'll give you a blow-by-blow, day-by-day chronology of the shooting, plus interviews and things like that.
Now, when it comes to your character, Captain Rhodes, how did you prepare for that? Because you got the lead role of what we knew later on in the film, that Captain Rhodes slowly becomes insane. Even though he becomes an asshole first, but then he's an insane asshole.
Well, first of all, every character in their own way, some more obvious than others, became insane. Most notably, Dr. Logan, Frankenstein, who called him, really was just going out of his mind. Sarah and, oh my God, I can't remember John Amos's character. I shot the guy in the head. That'll come to me. I'm sorry about that. You know, they were starting to see that Logan was going insane, and they were kind of figuring out how they were going to get out of that booby hatch. And then you had John, that the helicopter pilot's character's name? John?
Yeah, that's John, a.k.a. Flyboy.
Flyboy, yeah. He was going deeper and deeper into his voodoo analogy, Haitian analogy of life, in a sane way, but in many ways that whole speech in the Winnebago was kind of an homage, because in the 1920s and 30s there were about 4 or 5 major zombie. I walked with a zombie, white zombie. Bela Lugosi's in one of them. I can't remember the exact titles, but there was a very successful period of time for zombie movies, and that whole speech was kind of an homage to that. You had the radio operator, Jarlett's character, who was drinking as much booze as he could till it ran out. I just remembered John Appleton's, he was Fisher. And Rhodes was insane to begin with. He kind of had the same insanity that Hitler had. It wasn't going to take much to light his fuse at all. Once Major Cooper died and he took over the show, you knew it was going to be a losing proposition.
Yeah, in terms of story, it's actually interesting because the fact that we know the name Major Cooper, but we don't have no real insight of who he was. He just was just a major that was killed in either by a zombie attack or other means.
It's never been made clear, but it will be made clear within the next 2 years, and that's all I'm going to say about that. That's kind of a behind-screen secret.
Like I said about Major Cooper, it's like we don't know exactly about him, but that's the interesting part of it. It's like you don't necessarily need to have full insight on every single character in this particular film.
Right. It obviously was a government operation, and it was, I guess, a last chance shot at destroying whatever created this occurrence, which is another mystery in all the movies. It's even a mystery. I don't know if you're paying attention to Del Toro's. It'll come to me. Too many brain cells burnt. Your listeners will know what I'm talking about. Title will come to me probably, hopefully, in the next few minutes. But it also deals, it's called The Strain, Strain. And once again, these creatures appear, but no one has really addressed the why or how of it, you know. And even if we go back to Night of the Living Dead, and that's, it's not answered in the first movie, and it's never been answered. And I'm not sure George wants it answered, you know. I think the most telling clue was some of the PR they used on Dawn of the Dead, the famous phrase, when there's no more room in hell, the dead shall walk the earth. So maybe there's no more room in hell. I don't know. Nobody seems to know.
Who knows? It could be a natural thing. We don't know. But that's what's cool in this film of Day of the Dead. Is that you have a group of scientists and you have military that were originally there to aid the scientists, and you see Sarah is trying to figure out why it's or how it's happening, and then Dr. Logan tries to figure out how it's happening with the zombies, trying to from a biological view.
Also, in his own insanity, he was trying to domesticate them, which in the original long multi-million-dollar budget film, Captain Rhodes was more like a Dr. No figure, and there were people who had armies of good zombies, and there were people who had armies of bad zombies, and there were all these wonderful scenes in the jungle and rounding up the zombies, a la Planet of the Apes. But George couldn't guarantee a PG rating, and so they actually made the film stronger than anybody thought it would be, because big scale, helicopters flying and dropping nets on zombies and fortresses and mass baptisms of zombies and things like that. So he had to cut the budget way back, and that's how we ended up underground. The conflict between the military point of view going head-to-head with the scientific point of view, going head-to-head with the Haitian spirituality point of view, going to Antoine de Leo's character, a Hispanic point of view, because actually Mexico is the only country that celebrates a day called Day of the Dead. So you had all these different points of view trapped in a very small claustrophobic situation, and it just was a collision of time bombs waiting to go off.
Like if you fast forward to the newer horror films, like zombie films, you see the characters are always dramatic, freaking out about this and this and this, but this film, these characters are actually, on the outside, are actually pretty calm. They're like, okay, we're stuck here. How can we make the best of it until we can either get rescued or find a way out?
Right.
Rather than just, yelling at each other constantly and attempting to kill each other, this one tries to make their own home in this cave. Right. And try to live with each other as best as possible, even though they can't stand each other for a lot of the time, because the military are trying to get answers, like Captain Rhodes. He wants answers. He wants it now.
Yeah.
And you got the scientists. Yeah. They're trying to figure it out. They have no idea, but yet they have no equipment to really do this. And Dr. Logan's pretty much the only one that has a significant answer at this point.
Yeah, well, except Logan was a Mad Hatter. I mean, you just knew it the moment he walked in the door in the mess hall scene with his coat covered in blood and, asking, is there food? Is there food? And that's when Rhodes just blows the stack and says, I'm running this monkey farm, not Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck doing with my time, Yeah. Actually, George has said many times that it's his favorite part of the trilogy, which makes me pretty happy.
This film in particular is the fact, I think it's the closest, at this time, would be the closest as far as an explanation or insight of an actual zombie apocalypse, because you can see each aspect, like from the military and, like you said, and the scientist point of view, and it's like they're trying to work it out, and it's like, this is as close as I've seen, other than World War Z. Is the only other one that I know that has some kind of an explanation of some kind.
Right. Hopefully, we're not going to reach a saturation point of zombies. I made a joke at the Pittsburgh convention. I said, has anybody seen IHOP Zombies, where you stop in for a stack of pancakes, or Sorority Zombie, I Ate a Thigh, or Home Depot Zombies, Don't Put the Nail Gun to Your Head. I saw this really terrible movie, I thought, called Zombie Detention. you should look at it if you have.
I'm totally going to.
You can use your imagination. High school kids stuck in detention, and some of them are zombies. It's just, on the other hand, it's a very brilliant film called Mimesis, which is a virtual reality game that is based on the original Night of the Living Dead. It's called Mimesis, and it's a wonderful film. It's a wonderful film. George is now, I think he's in his 5th edition of his comic book, Vampire Empire, or Empire of Vampires. I got a couple of copies when I was in Pittsburgh. I just haven't had a chance to read them, but maybe that'll be the basis for his long-awaited next film.
No, that'd be cool.
Yeah, it would be. It would be comic book style. George always signs on his autograph. He always says, "Stay scared." It's becoming harder and harder to stay scared at a movie because the world political situation is so fucking scary.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, you just ask yourself, or my plus fuck fans out there, ask yourself, when was the last time that you were really scared, either at a movie or reading a book or something that really made your spine tingle? You know, in the 50s, it was very easy with the science. You look at the science fiction films, the 50s, the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, or going back to the 40s, Howard Hawks's The Thing, Creature from Another Planet. And then, of course, you go to all of the Universal films that were fucking scary.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's a sign of the time as we become so sophisticated and so jaded to gore. You know, I mean, what are they going to make Saw 13 or Halloween 52, or you know, we've just become jaded to it, and so much of it is now computer graphic that hands-on thing that Savini and Greg Nicotero, people like that, you know, a real fleshy craftsmanship. I mean, look at my death scene in Day of the Dead. There was no CG there, no special animation, no, you know, doctoring. That was it. That's the effect. They shot the effect, and that's the effect. It wasn't enhanced. It wasn't, you know, painted over or whatever.
He didn't stick a double in there. You had to make it look like you.
I was stuck in a fucking hole in the floor for 4.5 hours. Yeah, I was there.
Smelling pig guts all day. Well, playing as Captain Rhodes, did the cave actually influence you in some way of your character?
Well, it affected us. It affected all of us in so many ways. All of us. First of all, we all got deathly ill with bronchial infections because the dust down there was just extremely bad. I mean, you know, I'll give you a gross example. I mean, after 12 hours, you go up to your room and wash your makeup off and blow your nose, and all this black shit would come out of your nose. The other thing is, because it wasn't a traditional movie set where you go back to your trailer when you weren't working between shots, there was nowhere to go. We had nowhere to go. We had, you know, little room, and we shot the shit when we weren't working. So in many ways, it made us, as an ensemble, it made us tighter, and we got to kind of read each other's sensibility. And the working conditions, I mean, except for those lucky few that got to go to Florida, I wasn't one of them, but for 8 weeks in the mine, we never saw sunlight. It was winter. We'd get up in the morning, it would be dark, and we'd finish 6, 7 o'clock at night, and it would be dark, and we'd go back to the hotel. And in most movies where the environment is kind of artistic creation, we were all stuck. The cast, the crew, the caterers, the gun wranglers, makeup people, gophers, we were all stuck in this really horrible place. All right, you're stalling me now. I'm loading my gun. Come on. Let me put the shot. Saving it for you.
But was there ever any discussion as far as the deaths of the characters? Were there ever any discussion in between you guys who should die and how should they die?
Oh, no. I mean, how Derek Clark Steele, me, of course, Rhodes, wonderful actor who's passed away, Ralph Guerrero, who was Rickles, and another wonderful actor, Richard Liberty, who was Logan. How we died was completely scripted, except for my death scene was the last day of shooting, because each actor had a day to die, because each one of those death scenes were fairly complicated special effects setup. My turn to die, because it was scripted that I would be cut, torn in half. That was definitely scripted. And I said to George, listen, George, I said, look, Captain Rhodes is not going to go down without having something to say about it. And he said, well, Joe, you're torn in half. Your esophagus is probably attached to your legs that are being dragged down the hallway. So, well, I mean, what? And I said, well, there's something I think he would say. He said, all right, well, he's being generous. He said, all right, just run it by me. And there were other people in the room, and I was a little embarrassed. I didn't want to say it out loud, so I said, can I whisper it in your ear? And he, big, tall guy, leans down and gives me his ear, and I went, choke on him. And he looked at me, and he said, all right. He said, you got it. I like it. I love it. Just make sure you get it right, because we're going to have 3 cameras rolling, and we only got one take on this hit. This is the martini shot of the film. Did we discuss amongst ourselves how, I know that Gary Steele made the choice to make the sign of the cross with his gun. That was that was his choice. But pretty much the how of the deaths were all scripted by George.
There's a lot of gore in this one compared to Dawn of the Dead. Was that kind of a risk in some factors? Because usually when film has this much gore, it's usually having to go through an assload of process just to get that R rating, or however they go for it. Because
there was no issue that they won. That's why the budget was cut down to I believe $4 million, because George never considered it getting rated. It wasn't going to happen, so it was like full speed ahead. You just go for fucking broke with it, and I think that's another thing that makes it because the gore, as in so many movies today, gore was relevant to the situation and relevant to the character's conflict, as opposed to the gore being gratuitous. Let's put 4 girls in a bikini in a cabin by a lake and see how many different ways we can blow their tits off.
Yeah. Especially like in the newer horror films, including the zombie films. I think more gore is a bore because that's all it is. There's no storyline. It's just straight up.
Exactly. That's, there are, as I said, this film I mentioned, Mimesis, actually has probably no gore. I saw this film with Mel Gibson. I think it was called Signs. It was about the crop.
Yeah, it's an alien film. It's a crop.
Yeah. And then there was a film about the guy who had a sense that doomsday was coming. And he built this bunker in his backyard. I'm terrible with names. I'm sure your listeners will know what I'm talking about. And then there was the other one with Matt Damon, where something in the wind was killing people. And as you said, as you pointed out, the gore we see today is gratuitous because it's tied into a very tight, intelligent, articulate storyline.
You don't have to have a ton of gore just to make a successful horror film.
No, but I mean, 2 examples. One is the original Frankenstein, which based upon Mary Shelley's book, which was called Frankenstein or Prometheus Unbound. A highly literate novel, and that is what allowed Karloff and James White to take off with the film. Or if you look at Spencer Tracy's portrayal, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, again based on Robert Louis Stevenson's novel, intelligent, exciting storyline with great characters. It's very hard to do. It's amazing when you think of how prolific George has been with all of his films. Including Monkey Shines and including Night Riders. He always had a very, very strong story with a very strong outlook on the world. And that's the sign of a great filmmaker.
Even limited of characterization, as far as how they act, how they react. It's not overdone. It's not underdone. It's right there in the moment.
Right. Yeah. Right. And because he creates a series of wonderful compelling moment, and I just hope he continues to do it.
Yeah. Overall, on the story itself, how'd you react to the final product of this? Were you pretty satisfied of how everything went, even including the ending?
Well, unfortunately, when the film released in the theaters, when it was released, I think it was released around Easter time. I can't remember exactly when it was released, but the critics, especially Siskel and Ebert, hated the movie because everybody wanted another shopping mall. They couldn't get beyond the fact that it did take place in like a skyscraper, when actually it Land of the Dead, it kind of did. The original Dawn of the Dead, all the critics, were just so amazed at George's social commentary by, making it take place in a shopping mall. They were stuck with a cave, and they poo-pooed it. We originally got, not in terms of the genre, I'm talking about, as I said, Siskel and Ebert, people like that, but actually 10 years later, they're both dead now, but one of them re-looked the film and rewrote his review and gave it a glowing review. So we weren't originally notorious people coming out. It was, we made the film and the critics didn't like it. And it took a good number of years for people to catch up to the film. And now, I do a lot of conventions, and people, they bring their kids. The kids are dressed like zombies, and they've seen the movie, and it's like they're handing the genre fans are handing the mantle over to their children. So you have a whole new generation of genre fans that are coming up. Because at that time, even though the success that Dawn of the Dead had, fervor and the intelligence and the largeness of the genre fan population was not that big at the time. There were very, very few conventions. So it took a while. Next year's the 30th anniversary of the movie. That's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, for something that's low budget and to the point where kind of like a make or break moment. This is another major film by George Romero. Having to get it out there is like possibly a huge risk for everyone as far as the acting perspective goes. Even kids could root to this film. Why? Because Miguel ends up being a hero.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then again, I go back to different point of views. And you remember when he opens up the elevator for the missile base, he takes his crucifix medallion and he makes the sign of the cross. And because of his action, that Rhodes and the bad guys got eliminated, and the good guys got to take off in the helicopter.
You see him at the beginning as, well, you could tell when he first started to be in the military, he wanted to be a strong person, but as you see something like this, that nobody in the face of the earth, if you're still on the earth, he'd even handle this type of situation, and you can tell he's slowly but surely just breaking apart, breaking down. Rhodes and his men aren't really helping too well. The chances are they don't really see him as an actual military figure of any kind. As you see, when he's trying to handle the zombie in the one scene, he lets go of the pole and almost gets his Riggles killed.
Well, it also shows the racism of Rhodes and company, because we refer to Tim's character as a spick, and then when I give Gary the order to punch out John, I say teach this jungle bunny a lesson. It's a definite anti-military sentiment running through that movie, which played right up my alley, because I was an old hippie and I had marched against the Vietnam War, so I basically really did not have much use for the military, so it was fairly easy for me to portray them in a kind of horrific light.
And not only that, there are more zombies in this film than Dawn of the Dead combined.
Right, absolutely.
And the fact all these zombies came from different regions, and not just pussy looking, disgusting, like goblin, ghoul looking type characters like all you see in zombie films that look pretty disgusting, like they came from the sewer. These are zombies that were infected. You can tell they were infected. You can tell that they were either hurt. Like one, for example, there's a zombie in there, a military zombie. He has his arms up like something fell on him, but he got bit, and then the zombie left, and then he ended up being a zombie, and he's stuck in that position as he walks into the bunker.
Right. And then there's that famous scene where Bub salutes Captain Rhodes, and Logan says, "Come on, he saluted you. I bet he was a soldier at one time, and it was salute him back." And I say, "You want me to salute that walking pile of pus? Salute my ass." And that's another line that I came up with when he was hunting me down in the hallway, and you could actually see it. I'm crawling, and I hit my head against the wall, and it really hurt like a motherfucker. In fact, I almost busted the shot, but I turned around and I said, "You pus fuck," and when the scene was cut and they were checking to make sure everything was okay, and we could move on to the next scene, the sound guy says, "Wait a minute," and he says to George, he goes, "Did he say pus fuck?" And George says, "Yeah, and I like it. Keep it." So, things happen.
It is a possibility that these zombies could be trained. How long? Who knows? We already saw how difficult it can be. Even though Dr. Logan was a crazy man, he had some sense in there. He knew sort of what he was doing, but he was also a butcher too. He used the body parts of already dead military.
That's what really pushed Rhodes over the edge. But you see it in Land of the Dead as well. The zombies had the ability to go across the river.
Yeah.
And then the moment where one of the zombies figures out how to use a chainsaw, and you kind of see a little bit of the possibility that there could be some signs of intelligent life found somewhere, in this holocaust of madness.
Each one has a phase. Night of the Living Dead, the original, George Romero, there's an outbreak. That's the first step. And then there's Dawn of the Dead, where zombies are just now starting to go other regions. As you can, if you were to combine Night of the Living Dead to this, no one still doesn't know what's going on, and that's when the cool part is the real military actually had a real role in this film as well.
Right.
And then Day of the Dead, it moves to a whole side of the world, bigger and bigger as far as hordes go. And then you look at Land of the Dead, they're starting to get more intelligence, and people. It seems like people is basically giving up on trying to just fight them. They just build a city and just live and try to do the very best they can, scavenge this, and then just fight off whatever zombies comes toward the city. But the zombies are actually getting smarter, and they don't realize that.
And the other important political point in Land of the Dead, it was only the rich people survived. Only the rich people were able to afford to live in that timeshare community, as it were,
Yeah.
And have the best of food, the best of drink, the best of everything that could be. Dennis Hopper's minions could go out, collect, and bring back, and then you have the zombie fight where Asia Argento is caught in the ring, and it really kind of almost like the fall of the Roman Empire dying in its own decadence.
Yeah, and then you go to Dire of the Dead. This is the stage where they're trying to figure out what do they like to eat. What do they really like to eat other than just brains? A little bit in Night of the Living Dead, like you'll see a zombie try to eat a moth or something, and you see Tom Savini's vision of Night of the Living Dead, the remake. You see a zombie eating a mouse head.
Right. There's all the symbols point some sort of, and that comes out too in 28 Days Later.
Yeah. Also a different one.
I think there were two of them. 28 Days Later, and then I forget what the other one was called.
20 weeks later.
This is the same kind of thing of stockpiling and you know, and then you know, George liked to say that fast zombies suck. You know, and then, you know, the zombies have the ability, you know, to run, you know, and then Shaun of the Dead, which was a brilliant satirical look at the zombie movie.
I thought it was great.
You know, Simon Pegg and I forget his partner's name.
Yeah, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost was in Shaun of the Dead.
Right. I mean, that you compare that to this film I mentioned, Zombie Detention. There's absolutely no comparison, because Shaun of the Dead was a very well shot. They actually pay homage to my death scene in it. You know, they made a brilliant film from a semi. And pretty much comedic, you know, the guy coming up to get his newspaper and not noticing that there's zombies walking all over the neighborhood, you know.
Or even the scene where they said that.
Where the guy gets shot, look through the hole in his body. You know, things like that. You know, nice little moments like that.
Or the Z word, the zombie word. He tells him not to, you know, don't say the Z word. And he goes, why not? Because it sounds ridiculous.
Which is actually funny, too, because the original title for Night of the Living Dead was The Flesh Eaters, you know, and I don't even think they used the word zombie to Night of the Living Dead, which is how it went into eminent domain, because there was some legal screw-up because they had registered the film as Flesh Eaters, and after so many years, there was no Flesh Eater film. It was Night of the Living Dead, and so it went into public domain, which George was on NPR radio about 3-4 weeks ago, and actually most of the interview was about the comic books, you know, and he talked about how it went into the public domain, and, you know, because I have a picture coming out soon, hopefully, if Simon West Productions, the people that did Black Hawk Down, called Night of the Living Dead Origins, which is the same story, only it's set in present time in New York City. But anybody and their grandmother can make Night of the Living Dead because it's in the public domain. George doesn't see it that. We haven't seen a dime in residuals from Day of the Dead. It has nothing to do with George. It has a lot to do with the producers who were just out to screw everybody, which is one reason why there was a remake, so that they could somehow get something back for what they. I mean, when a film ends up in the Museum of Modern Art, which Night of the Living Dead did 2 years ago, it's a permanent fixture in the archives of the Museum of Modern Art. That's that's a testimony to a great film and a great filmmaker.
Old school horror actually has some real thrills, real scares, and actually had some meaning because they remember it. Nowadays, it looks like a little bit too cartoony. It's like, especially when it comes to zombie films, a lot of the newer zombie films are just way too cartoony. They just kill them for the sake of killing them because they're there.
Right, well, Hollywood Hollywood has its great points and Hollywood has its bad points. They'll remake anything because there is. Nobody wants to take a risk with new ideas. I mean, a perfect example of that is, the success the Blair Witch Project had. Somebody took a shot at a new idea, as opposed to, Hollywood is about formula. If the formula works once, the formula is going to work again. But then you ask yourself, how many times can you see a guy in a fucking hockey mask stabbing people, or the last Halloween movie as compared to the first Halloween movie, which was a great movie, and so, it was a great movie, we'll do it this way. Instead of it happening on Monday, it'll happen on a Tuesday. Instead of it being in the country, we'll make it in the city. And then again, you go back to great writing. Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then you look at the movie Dracula, and you see a great story, an original story, a great movie. Or the silent film Nosferatu. There's actually a wonderful film again out there. John Malkovich plays Murnau, Nosferatu. Willem Dafoe plays the again, I can't. I'm terrible, but I'm sure you're a fan. And if you're not, smarten the fuck up, because I know where you live now. I know where all of you live now, and I can come and find you at any time I want. So you should be looking over your shoulder at all times.
Is there anything else you want to add as coming toward the Day of the Dead? Is there any other words you'd like to share with us before we go?
Yeah, actually there is. Shakespeare said that we are such stuff as dreams are made of. And 30 years ago, 4 or 5 other actors were the stuff of George's dream. It was George's dream, and we became the stuff that his dream was made of. We were performing for a camera, and the only audience when we were performing was the crew. So then when it was released and the public embraced it, the genre fans in particular embraced it, they then became part of George's dream. We are such stuff as dreams are made of. And I say this a lot, and I will end on this note, because genre fans are the best fans in the world, because they're not looky-loos. They come up to your table, they ask, some of them look a little weird with 14 or 15 rings in their nose and tattoos galore, but they ask intelligent questions. They're not just there to get an autograph and a picture. They want answers to their questions, and they know the material. It's not like, I got a picture of Tom Cruise. Ooh. I want to know this. I want to know, what was that moment like? What was happening there? Why do you think that happened? And without the genre fans, me personally, I would just be stuck on a piece of celluloid. But now, over the last 30 years, I have this extended family, and without the genre fans, we really don't exist. We exist in a film canister, or we exist in a video cassette or a CD, but it's that human contact provoked by George and embraced by the fans lovingly and intelligently that makes this whole ride worth taking. And as I said, you have parents bring their kids, and they're passing the torch, as Kennedy said, to a new generation of genre fans. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I hope you folk behind the screen of Raid will stay scared and will be demanding of people who present their work to you and ask tough questions, and most of all, have fun. Stay scared.
There you go, guys. Joe Pilato, Day of the Dead.
Hi, I'm Jeff Monahan, and you are listening to the Movie Raid Show.
It's time for the movie Raid. Tonight we're going to go behind Day of the Dead with actor Jeff Monahan, that is played as the Steel Hat taking zombie. I want to know, how were you approached with this role? Did you just hear about it, or was it like Dawn of the Dead, where they just invite a bunch of people and everyone heard about it and then they just hop onto it, or did you have to do the usual?
I was just a young actor. I hadn't done too much, just a handful of plays, hadn't done any films, but I was sort of a go-getter about trying to get involved in things, and I heard that they were casting at George's office in downtown Pittsburgh, 247 Fort Pitt Boulevard. It was the known haunt of George, had been for a long time. So I just walked in. Off the street, and there was a woman there named Barbara, who was one of the casting assistants or casting agents on it. And I said, I'd like to audition for the movie. And so she said, oh, okay. And she handed me script pages for the role of Steel. And I was just 20-something years old, just kind of a geeky kid. Hi, I'd like to. So all of a sudden I'm reading for Steel. And it was the part where he's threatening to cut Sarah in half with a machine gun, Laurie Cardill's part. I was just some skinny kid off the street. So I did this audition speech, and she said, great, you want to be a zombie? Like, okay. So I was like, and that was it. And I was first a zombie in the mine on the first day that I worked on the film, just sort of a background zombie. So I was down in the cave a fair distance from the compound where they were grabbing the zombies with the hooks, Mark Tierno and Deborah Gordon. And we were supposed to hurry up toward them to try to eat them. And I was hurrying as far as was proper for a zombie. My motivation was just to get closer to the camera. I was just trying to do my zombie walk and lurch up there and as quickly as possible. And for some reason, somebody liked me enough to do something and came up to me and said, "Hey, would you like to come back tomorrow and be a featured zombie?" I was like, yeah, you bet. I went the next day to be a featured zombie. That's how that came about.
And did you ever had any other interactions with all the other extras and whatnot? There's quite a bit of extras and featured zombies in this. Did you ever interact with anyone, or like even share like how to do what? Did anyone actually had experience as well, or were they all pretty inexperienced as well?
There was mostly just inexperienced people, but fans. I mean, the zombies were by and large fans of Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead, as I was, and so it was just this incredible honor to come and be a small part of something like this. We only got paid $1 a day, and a hat. $1 and a hat, saying that said I sort of a painter's cap that said I was a zombie in Day of the Dead. But it was just basically people who knew of the films, who we knew instinctively how to walk and do our interpretation of whatever zombie type of thing that we wanted to do, and there really wasn't any reason to direct people in terms of that. It's like everybody was doing their own cool zombie stuff, so it was just fun working with a whole bunch of people. And even the actors, in the main roles, I mean, everybody was just sort of down to create the best spooky movie.
Who was actually involved as far as what kind of zombie you should have been? Did you have some form of input about that? What did you actually choose? What kind of concept, or they had something in mind, like any background or anything, like any kind of motivation to give you? Or is like, here, this is what you are, and then you just had to figure out the kind of motivation of your own.
Well, it was the most interesting thing for me because I was made up by Howard Berger, who went on to win an Oscar, I believe, for Narnia, and he was a really great guy. And it was Howard and someone else. It wasn't Tom. It could have been Greg Nicotero, I'm not certain, but it was Howard, and he had an assistant. And I went into the big makeup room on the second day, and the first day I was just painted blue, in a sense. On the wall in the big makeup room, there were a bunch of masks, so they were close to the camera. With mine, they were going to do a full makeup. Howard really wanted to do something special, and so he wanted to I was going to be shot in the head, and so he had a latex piece over my face, which covered the forehead and covered the eyes, actually. Part of the cheek. Bullet hit was right in the middle of the forehead. And what they do is they attach a condom on the back of your head filled with blood, so they trigger that electronically, so the hole appears in the front of your head as the back of your head blows off. Which is very funny because Howard had the piece attached under the latex. He had the explosive charge attached already, and they were halfway done with the makeup. And he whispered to his assistant, he says, "Do you have the explosive facing the right direction?" And the assistant said, I think so. I'm pretty sure. And I'm laying there thinking, oh my God, if it goes off in the wrong direction, it's going to shoot me in the head. And then they laughed, and I realized they were just kidding with me the entire time. So they actually, did it properly. But as Howard got more and more into doing the makeup, he decided to make it like a drowning victim, and he sent the assistant outside to pick lichen and such out of the grass and things around the mine and bring it in and say, yeah, this looks great. Go out and get some more. So he just kept attaching more and more lichen, more and more moss. And so I became this swamp zombie. Chris Romero, George's wife at the time, came by, and she called me Broccoli Man. Now, you'll be known as Broccoli Man. Anytime I sign at any of these conventions, that's what I use, Broccoli Man, because that came from Chris Romero. But it was just Howard getting very, very creative and very into it. And then he said to me when we took photos and things afterwards, he and I together, and he said, "Man, this is my favorite makeup of the entire movie. I'll send you pictures when I get back to LA." And I thought, no, you won't. Why would you send some kid from Pittsburgh any pictures? Come on. But I thought. And a couple of weeks later, after the movie wrapped, I get an envelope in the mail, and I open it, and there's all these great photos. He made prints. He sent me a really nice letter saying that, again, that was his favorite makeup of the movie. And so it was just an honor to be made up by him, and it was just great that it was his favorite makeup. But it was just this incredible look, very, very unique look, which I love.
How long did you actually had to stick around there? Not just like for the makeup aspect of things. Like, did you actually had to wait or anything like that for a notification? Like, okay, we're going to need you on these days or whatever. Was there a long periods of time? Did you actually have to travel back and forth, or was it just like, kind of like on most part on your end?
Well, you said had to stick around. It wasn't a matter of having to. I was loving it, so I would stick around as long as they would have me. It was probably more like a 10 or 12 hour day, both days, especially the second day, because the makeup took a couple of hours. But I was just thrilled to be there as long as possible. There is one thing which I had totally forgotten about, and somebody reminded me of it sometime in the past year. There's a documentary about Day of the Dead, and I'm in it, which I had forgotten. In the documentary, it's like I'm sitting on a couch in full makeup between two girls who were working production, and we were just talking about the film and talking about the makeup and such like that. So I was down for being there as long as they would have me. And in fact, when I drove home with as much of the makeup still on me. It was just like, I just want to keep this on as long as possible. I'll shower when I get home. It was fine.
How was like the zombie scenes? Like when your time was coming up, like were you actually in a way roaming around with all the other zombies as too, or were you only in specifically that scene and then that was it?
I was only in that scene. Each of the zombie makeups, I was only in the one scene. And then with the one where Steele shoots me in the head, I was there actually around the corner. George himself is the one who shoves me through the doorway because I couldn't see where Gary Clark was standing when he's talking to Bub, doing his "Hey Bub" thing at the window. So George shoved me through. He grabbed me by the shoulders, took me by the shoulders, and he said, "Okay, I'll just get ready. When I want you to go, I'll just shove you through." And I said, "Okay, George," and through I went. And actually at that time it had been hours since the makeup was done, and when the makeup was first done, and you can see this on different photographs that were taken of me, you could see my eyes pretty well when they first finished the makeup. But by that time in the day when we were actually filming, the makeup, the latex had pulled away from the skin a little bit, which made the eyes seem really, really sunken in. My vision wasn't that great, but it looked really cool from the other side. So
yeah, how was the actual zombie choreograph? Like, now you see in the scene, like they're all pretty well filed together and organized, but how did that directing process go? Was it like everyone has their mark? I mean, especially you couldn't even really see much, but did Tom Savini have a good majority of the directing, or Greg, or they all three of you kind of threw in their own part in that?
Well, there'd be like zombie wranglers in a sense for the larger scenes when it was just a group of people, and it was like, we need you to stand over here and we need you to walk forward at this point, and if somebody wanted to do something, yeah, go ahead and do that. For me, it was just those two scenes. And our direction the first time was just try to get up there and eat them. And the direction on the second time was George saying, "I'm going to shove you through the doorway." So, and then I tried to actually even kind of elongate the scene for me, because after I'm shot and I drop out of frame, I had no idea what they were going to shoot next. And I thought, well, they might get a wide shot of the room. And so I was lying down on the floor, and there was a cabinet there, and I put my hand up through the handle of the cabinet and stuck a couple of fingers down through the handle as though I had fallen into the cabinet, and it kind of twisted my arm around kind of backwards, and they were like, "Oh man, that looks really cool, get that." But it actually didn't end up in the film. They didn't use a wide shot in the film because obviously that moment was much more about Gary and Steele shooting himself. I was trying everything I can to milk it as much as possible, because it was great fun, and it was the first time I'd ever been shot in the head, so that was exciting. Because when you're squibbed, and I've been squibbed a number of times since, there's always that adrenaline rush, like, okay, they are going to press a button and something on your body is going to explode, and you have to, you're going to die. So hopefully not for real.
That is like a very small room for that fact. I mean, exactly, like, how far did you really have to go? Like, was it like pretty much an inch to you, or almost felt like a mile to you, because you couldn't really see much, but you had all these other zombies, like, literally not behind you, side of you, you got steel in front of you, no less than not even a couple inches, and then not only that, you also have the camera crew. Like, how was that process? Like, how was that even shot like that?
It was very, very tight, and of course the thing I was supposed to do was to grab the hat off his head, so of course the focus is like, okay, find his frickin' head and grab the hat off of it, so I got to grab the hat off his head. That was what I was told to do. That was the thing. It was pretty tight because, like you say, you did have the camera, the DP, everybody like smack in front of you, and the other folks around you, and being half blind because of the way the makeup was working beautifully, but my vision was somewhat limited, so you just kind of went with it. And the biggest challenge, I think, or the biggest thing that's on your mind when you do something like that is you got one shot at this, because they're going to blow a hole in your head, and if this doesn't work, or if you wander off camera somewhere, if you don't hit your mark, if you don't do it, are they going to re-rig you? Probably they may not, and it would take time and cost money and all that sort of thing. So you have to do it right the first time when you're dealing with a special effect like that. So it was something I was very thankful that we all pulled off together, and it worked.
Were there ever like any almost retakes of the gore effect? For example, originally the actor who plays Steel actually recommended. Yes, thank you. He actually suggested to George Romero, saying, hey, I need to talk to you about my death scene, and then, wanted to do the death scene of himself, like, in his own way. And the gore effect, as far as shooting him and whatnot, like, was this, done maybe once or twice, or was this like pretty much a one take? Because a lot of this was on a tight budget, tight angling, just pretty much a quickie in a sense. Like, even Joe Pilato's scene as well, he had to get it go. Like, even the gore where all the blood's coming out, is like, oh, shoot it. So was that kind of in the same way, in the sense of, for you, were you just kind of waiting? I mean, what was the thought process for you, just like in that one tight spot second, like at a young age, like what was really in the thought process for you on that moment?
Just don't screw up. That was the big thing, because as weird as it sounds, it's so quick and it seems so simple, but like I say, you're going to be shoved through the doorway. Don't hit the doorway. Don't trip over your own feet. Keep seeing out of the makeup. They're going to shoot you in the head. What is that going to feel like? I didn't know, because it's the first time I'd ever done it. How much reaction am I going to actually have to do on my own, or what? Where do I end up? Because I was told to just like stagger off to my left, because I'll be out of the shot and all that sort of thing. So at that point, but the biggest thing with that is you don't want to be the reason that the shot doesn't work. But with the effects that George's team, and this goes from Savini to Howard, all those guys, they're so good, they're so professional, and the actors care about getting it right. They're not there just for the paycheck or anything. We want to make this work. So typically there aren't retakes, because like you say, it's a tight budget, be a major reset to do it, and you could do, obviously, acting scenes. You could do several takes and things like that. But with a scene with an effect, you really want to get it in one take, which is why often they use multiple cameras and things like that. But as far as I remember, there was only one camera on us for this as well. And of course, those days they're shooting film, so it's not like now where you can have all the freedom of digital, so it's expensive when you're running film through the camera. So the idea of just getting it right the first time is so important.
Now, how much time did you actually spend in this costume? Now, before the scene, like you mentioned, like you already had these appliances on for quite a long time, but before this scene even occurred, like, as far as like, you got to eat, you might have to go to the restroom or whatnot. Like, how was that? Like, did you have to leave that in the whole time? Like, especially the costume. I mean, how was the process of like having to stay in costume and having to go basically live in this for X amount of hours.
You just have to be very, very careful when you're like that, because I had lichen on my hands and the nails were done and all the rest of that sort of thing. So anything you do, you just have to be very careful not to mess that up. You know, and if a piece of lichen would have fallen off, which I don't know if anything ever did, but, you know, it would be like, you'd have to, like, judge, well, geez, is that going to affect the look of me, or is that just that one little tiny quarter-inch piece of weed that's gone now? But, like, eating becomes an issue. I had false teeth in for it, but anything with makeup, even if you didn't have the false teeth, you have to eat certain foods and not eat other certain foods, and drink through a straw, and just be very, very careful. And as an actor since then, I mean, I always eat very gingerly on any film. I'll gorge like crazy afterwards, but I don't eat tons of food, which is always a little crazy with so much food typically being available on set, where you have craft services all day and amazing meals when they're served, you know. But with makeup especially, you just have to be careful not to mess the makeup up, and so that's the first priority, you know, at meal times and such like that. Yeah.
Was the temperature in that cave or any other parts of that area, did that affect you while you were wearing all that? Was it pretty comfortable, or was it just like, oh, I hope we just got to get to the scene before I fry to death or something like that?
It was pretty chilly. It was I forget what the temperature was in the Wampum mine, but it's consistent. So it's like in the 50s. I think it's in the 50s in the middle of the summer. It's in the 50s in the middle of the winter. It's always like a particular, you know, it only varies by a couple of degrees. But it was pretty chilly. But luckily, I was dressed warmly enough, and I can't recall. They may have put long underwear on me underneath the suit. I can't recall, but that would have been a possibility. Pretty sure I didn't have knee pads or anything like that, since I wasn't supposed to fall, and that was my own anxiousness to say, I'll actually fall, you know, and do that. But I don't remember being uncomfortable with cold in the mine, and the space that we were in when I was killed, that was a bit warmer. It wasn't out, you know, in the heart of the mine itself, so that was a bit fine.
Now let's talk about the makeup. You know, being in this cave, and the actors and crew all had to deal with the soot that was going on in that mine, and they were coughing and sneezing, all that black stuff. Did it ever affect you and the other zombie actors? You know, like, as far as, did the suit ever affect the actual makeup itself, or before or even during the filming?
No, I don't recall any issues with that. The place was pretty clean for a mine, which sounds odd, but it was used to store like RVs and all that sort of thing. So within the structure itself, the mine, it was basically a place where people kept their off-season RVs and such like that. So it wasn't like you're going into a working mine. I did another film years later where we were in a working mine, and it was a concern, and they had to make sure they braced up the ceiling of this other mine where we had shot this other film, Out of the Black it was called. But that was a real working mine, so we had real minor concerns with that, major minor concerns. With this one, it was basically a storage facility, so there was nothing mine-like that would have gotten to you except for the chill in the air. So, but it wasn't too uncomfortable.
Now, how long was the actual process of the makeup? Now, there was a test makeup, obviously. Was there a difference between the two, like, as far as what they were testing with? How long did that take, and how long did it take for the final actual process? And then did that have to be reapplied later, or was it just like, boom, here it is, it's on you, and now you have to leave it on until you're seen?
It was all at one time. The first day makeup was just like, hey, paint them blue, paint them gray type of look, which was very, very simple. The masks, like I said, was sort of the intermediate zombies who would be closer to camera and have the rubber masks on, which I didn't do any of those. And then the other one was just, hey, put this guy in a chair and make him up as something. And then it was just fortunate for me that Howard got inspired and went with it. but it was a one-time thing. So it isn't like, hey, we're going to test this makeup and see how it works, and let's tear that off and try something else. It was just a matter of, it's like you're sitting down as an artist, as a makeup artist. I guess, you're going to sit down and you're going to make a painting on this person. And with me, because of the latex, because of the appliance that had to, where I had to be shot and such, there was a certain technical element to it because of that. And then he could have just colored me, with blue and green and whatever. But when he had the idea for lichen, and I don't know where he got the idea for the lichen, he may have seen it on the way in that morning. But when he sent the assistant out, like, let's try this, it just developed and took off. So it became very unique because of that. But there wasn't any sort of time to test or let's do a shoot and take a look at that on camera. No, it was like, hey, let's come up with something cool. And they were just flying with it. So the energy was great. The speed with which they worked was great. And there wasn't any waste. There wasn't any sort of, if this was a major studio production where you'd have to get certain things approved. And George stayed out of the makeup area in terms of any sort of input as far as it had to do with me, because he hired people that he trusted, and they were brilliant. So, and that's what he does. That's what he does with actors, and what I've done, other shows I've done with him, like Bruiser, years later. He just, hey man, that was great, man. Go. He lets you do your thing. He does his thing. He lets you do your thing, and it all kind of comes together. No micromanaging from him, and he was just it's always been said, like, he was just such a nice, big, cuddly teddy bear of a guy, and that's what he was. So him trusting the makeup people to do what they do really allowed them free reign with their creativity, which was great.
What kind of material, at least if you actually heard of it, or what kind of material was actually used to apply for your makeup? Now, this is the kind of makeup that didn't exactly come off as easy as well. I've seen some of the actors really you basically might as well get a shovel try to peel that off.
Yeah. Well, they use spirit gum, very sticky substance that they sort of paint on, and then they attach the latex to that, and then whatever sort of grease paint type of thing for parts of you that would be like, for example, my neck. There was no appliance on the neck since I wasn't shot in the neck. So they would just use different types of grease paint and shadowing. And again, going back to them being artists, they can make your neck look scrawny or whatever it is by the highlights and shadows with it, and using different colors. And of course, the freedom you have with zombies is you can add a big glob of blood or attach some hunk of whatever, or build up a piece of latex or whatever to do that. So in a sense, I was made up in two ways. The one which under the latex, with the latex piece, actually making up the latex itself, and then the actual bare skin. And it is a little thing where you just have to kind of gently, and you can get help by anybody who is there on the makeup crew, just prying it slowly off. You don't want to rip it off and tear your skin or anything. But there's solvents that you can slip under the edges of the latex slowly, and kind of peel it back, work it off, and it just comes off. So it wasn't a big hassle or anything like that.
Now, did yours take the longest as far as process? Because it seems like your makeup could take at least at that time, 4 or 5 hours. At least that's what it looked like with the road trip, and compared to all the other zombies. Or was it just purely focused on you? Or was it was that individual for each zombie, or was everybody in the same room and everybody just basically was just worked on in a rotational clock in a way?
There were different makeup artists working all in one large room. When Howard was doing me, as far as I know, he was doing no one but me. He was with me the entire time. Now, he may have walked away while something dried or something like that for a minute, but he came right back. So they did you zombie by zombie by zombie. It was sort of the zombie assembly line of that. But they had different people doing it, and I'm sure the experience of each of the makeup artists indicated what type of makeups that they were doing. And Howard was very experienced at the time and certainly gained a lot more experience over the years, but he was extremely good, obviously, at the time. But so I was just, I was his guy, and he was my guy for the length of it. And it did take a couple hours, I guess, around that, but it wasn't a really prolonged, uncomfortable process in any way. I've done other things since then where they would take 4 or 5 hours to do something on you, but with this, for the amazing result that they got, it wasn't quick, but it wasn't. Uncomfortable. You weren't sitting there wondering if it's the following day yet or something like that. It was just a couple of hours, I would say, at most.
Now, how many pieces was actually added to this? Was it one big piece? Because it looked like there was like a multiple, like including the paints, including any kind of accessories to the makeup, the face especially. Like, what was there multiple pieces? Or was it like just one big piece?
As far as I recall, it was just one large piece that covered the forehead entirely, came down over both eyes, and the part of the cheeks, just holding it on there like that. And of course, while they're doing it to me, I'm not like privy to everything they're doing. I'm not watching or questioning or anything that too much. There could have been something else going on, but I would say 95% certain it was just the one piece, and I took it off at the end of the day. It was just that it was all stuck together. And my hair, they just matted my hair down with green goop. You're all wet and it's cold and it's, the gunk they're putting on you, but that's part of the fun. That's why you're doing it, because this is like, it's like playing dress up on being in a cool monster movie. So it's like, if you're into that, and I certainly was, I was like, yeah, man, this is like, do what you will. It was just, it was great.
And after the process was done and after the scenes were done and the film eventually wrapped up, was there ever a point where you got to actually have to view this, or did you have to wait till the movie actually just came out? Was there ever any special viewing for the zombies itself, or was it just like a hearty thank you
No.
and everything like that?
It was just a thank you, and here's your hat, and here's your dollar bill, and that was it. And then I actually don't even remember seeing the movie for the first time. I was anxiously awaiting it for the time it takes, because it's obviously the rest of the shoot, but then there's the whole post-production process, which could take many, many months. But definitely was something I was waiting to see. But there wasn't a big screening or anything like that for the zombies. We were just fans who were thrilled to be there to do what we could, and so I had to wait for it like everybody else.
And when you did see this, or by the time you had a chance of this, like what the outcome as far as the popularity goes at that time had either mixed or even negative. Like, what was your initial reaction for that? Like you said yourself, at that time you were young. I mean, did you ever felt like you felt like you did your best shot, but you still stood by George on this, even though, or did you feel like, oh man, this is gonna, not do so well in my future career?
At that time, hadn't, other than a few plays, I hadn't done any other films. I was certainly thinking about it. It wasn't something that I was worried about would hurt me in any way, certainly, and it wasn't something that I thought would help either. It was just like that one individualized experience. I do remember when it came out, I think a lot of the negativity toward it could have, and this was my theory, which I remember, is that Night of the Living Dead, everybody knows what a farmhouse is. So you felt the claustrophobia. You know what a house is. You know how big that house is. And so if zombies are trying to get you, you know what your limited space is. In the mall, obviously it's a much bigger space, but everybody's very familiar with the mall. So you know with your limited spaces, they're out there. With the mind, one of the concepts of just having a mind is that there are all these tunnels and random places and stuff. So it was a different type of setting because the claustrophobia was not in a known space that the average moviegoer would have recognized. So I think, in a sense, the claustrophobia, if people were expecting that in some way, they didn't get the claustrophobia because they weren't familiar with the space, as we were being in the space. But for the common, everyday guy watching the movie, wouldn't have been something they would be familiar with. But I also think that there was such a love of Dawn of the Dead that, like we were talking earlier, how things progress and advance, like onto the Land of the Dead, like it did, and all of that. There was a progression of story in Day of the Dead. So maybe people wanted Dawn of the Dead 2, which would have been very silly. And I don't think something that George would have responded to doing. He wanted to say, okay, what's the next step? What's the next chapter? So you had to go with that. And if you resisted it, then you would maybe not be a fan of the movie as much initially. But that's also why I think it grew. Because that initial reaction when expectations were not met in one way, on subsequent viewings, you can come to appreciate what really was done now that you can leave your expectations behind. This is still a really cool movie, and you can get into it for what George meant it to be.
And there you have it, everybody. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to this? Are there any cons or any other kind of events or even some projects that you also want to plug in right now?
Next project coming out on August 23rd, just very shortly, premiering at Fright Fest in London, England, is Pig Hill. Is directed by Kevin Lewis, who directed Nicolas Cage film Willy's Wonderland. It stars Rainey Qualley, who's Margaret Qualley's sister from The Substance, Rainey Qualley, Shane West from Nikita, Shiloh Fernandez from Evil Dead 2013, who's also now doing the new Christopher Nolan film Odyssey. But Pig Hill, written by Jared Burris, and that's one of those films that Marty Schiff was also a producer on from all of the George films. So that's coming out August 23rd at Fright Fest. Distribution following that at some point soon. So hopefully everybody can catch that. But George actually started so many things for me because I ended up doing half a dozen different projects with him, worked on some of his scripts subsequently later on as well. And so I'm just very eternally grateful for getting started and I'm happy that all these years later, we just had our 40th anniversary with this, with Day of the Dead, that I'm still at it, still making films, and some of them horror films, as Pig Hill is. So I'm happy for the beginnings that he gave me.
And there you have it, everybody. That is Jeff Monahan. It's time for the movie rate, and tonight we go behind the screams with John Harrison, film composer from Day of the Dead film. Hello.
How you doing, Mike?
What's going on?
Just hanging out in sunny, hot Southern California at the moment.
Enjoying the barbecues recently?
No, actually, I've been working. I've been busy. Well, that's not entirely true. I've made a little time to hang out with a couple of people and have a few dogs and burgers.
Tell us how'd you get approached to this film per se?
Well, I knew George from a long time, and we had done different projects together, including the movie before this called Creepshow. And there was a period of time when George was trying to get Day of the Dead up, and it was going through different incarnations. He had a much larger, more expensive, more elaborate script that he was trying to get off the ground at one point. When we couldn't raise the money to do that particular script, he revised it into a more manageable production, which is what ended up on the screen, and in fact has become kind of a classic now. So in the end, I guess you'd say it kind of all worked out well. So I was I'd come back out to Los Angeles after Creepshow and was directing episodes of his Tales from the Dark Side TV show and writing them and doing the music for them. They were, you had to be a sort of a full-service enterprise for those. And they were a lot of fun, and at the time the money came through. He said, come on back, let's do this. And so my wife and I flew back. She was the production coordinator, and I was the AD, and worked with George. We did the shoot, and then I segued into the music composition.
When composing, did you have full control as far as the creative process goes, or did George also have a hand in this?
Oh, well, George always had a hand in it. I mean, the thing about George is, first of all, he's a very gifted film editor, and as a result, even though he's not a musician, he has an incredible musical sense. I was always astonished at how he had, first of all, he had a wonderful collection of film scores, so he knew movie music. But he also was able to create scores out of library cues and what we call needle drops because he never had the money for original scores in his early films, and so he would put together scores out of pre-existing cues, and because he was such a fabulous editor, he could put together 2 or 3 cues and make them sound like something entirely new. So he always had a great musical sense and a real knowledge of what he wanted for his films. And when Creepshow came along, and I did that for him, he and I collaborated constantly on what that was going to sound like. That translated into our working relationship on Day of the Dead. The great thing about working with George is that he wanted me to be around all the time in post-production. And if you know the business very well, that's really kind of a luxury for a composer. Most times, composers and directors have precious little time together. The composer's given a cut of the film, he writes by himself, maybe he shows temp cues to the director, maybe sends over a couple of pieces of music just to get approvals. But the next time the director sees it often is on the scoring stage. In this case, I was able to be back in the Berg for the entire post-production period. And so I'd be downstairs in a little cubbyhole that we set up where I brought all my gear. And Pat Buba and George, Pat Buba the editor, and George would be upstairs. They'd be working on cuts. They'd come downstairs and they'd drop like VHSs through the mail slot. And I would get them and load them up, and I would write to them. And then I was able to bring cues upstairs and say, temp cues, and say, what do you think of this? And George would say, yeah, man, a little of this or a little more of that. And I'd go back down, revise it. So by the time I got to the recording studio to do the score for the soundstage, it was almost completely written, and we'd already seen it against the movie, so there were no surprise. It was a fabulous way to work. And so he was involved deeply all the way through.
Now, was this the same equipment you used as you did in Creepshow, or was this a whole new setup?
I had more gear for Day. The technology moves so fast, and it was moving so fast back then, that by the time we got to Day, which was, I think, about 4 years later, 5 years later than Creepshow, there were all kinds of new things that I could play with. Essentially, it was the same gear. It was a couple of music processors, and I brought in a fabulous guitarist named Grant Geisman to play with me on Day. We had a wonderful percussionist. I played the bass. So it was a little bit more elaborate in some ways than the Creepshow score, and obviously a completely different style and sound. Essentially the same kind of thing. We didn't have the budgets back then to hire orchestras or even small ensembles to do the score. I had to do everything.
The score itself is different compared to other horror films. This one's a distinctive sound. What were you aiming for as far as the direction goes, the creative direction?
Well, we had talked about this a lot, and one of the things that we definitely wanted to do that I had pitched to George was, why don't we be a little counterintuitive about this? And instead of writing the normal kind of creepy, full of shocks and stings horror score, why don't we go against the grain a little bit? The movie, as you know, is very grim. The world it creates is very dark, in many ways hopeless. And so I thought, well, that could be kind of an unrelenting emotional drag for 2 hours. Maybe we can lighten it up. We can use the music to find those moments of humor that George always has in his movies. We could give it a broader texture. It's a very claustrophobic movie. It's all down in the caves and just occasionally outside. And I thought the music could really go against the grain a little bit and help that out. When George had written the original version, the bigger script, it was set in southern Florida and the Keys, and it really had a very Caribbean feel to it. So I went with that as kind of a theme and started fooling around with motifs that were in that kind of vein. And I put together a small demo of a couple of themes that I was working on, and George really loved them. Well, then when the new script came in and he had to abandon that whole idea, we kept the ideas that I had written for the music. Those were the ones that ended up in the film. It was a little controversial at the time. There were a lot of people who didn't like that score at the beginning because they thought, well, it's not horror enough. It's not scary. It's not creepy.
Yeah, there's no boom or bah.
Yeah, it's not the real weird, creepy strings that make chills go up your spine. The big shock stings that come out and whenever anything happens. It was much more lyrical, but over time, it's actually become very popular, and people really dig it. And last year they put out a new collector's edition CD and LP. It's, I guess, stood up over time.
and then sometimes you'll hear just a regular band playing throughout, a gore scene, someone hacking someone to death or something like that.
Yeah.
But for this type of piece of music, this actually stands out. It's something different. It's not too poppy. It actually fits very well with each scene as you watch the film. It pulls you in there. Even toward the end, you hear you can hear the zombies coming in.
Yeah, well, George and I told you George had this unbelievable collection of soundtracks. I mean, I have a bunch, but man, he has wall-to-wall great scores. And not just horror scores. I mean, we're talking the greats of, I would say younger guys like Jerry Goldsmith, but, going back to Bernard Herrmann and Korngold and Franz Waxman and all those guys, their kinds of music, the way they fit the film, the way they supported the emotional moments in the movies were things that George and I really dug. The fact that we were doing a horror movie didn't mean that we were going to abandon that. We wanted this music to have the same quality as those kinds of scores that we love. That's why it works the way it does, I think.
Well, a little bit influential from each scene as you hear the music. Every piece puts together.
Yeah, there are themes, obviously repetitive motifs that we restate them different ways. They have different orchestrations so that given the different scene, they make sense. I hope it's kind of a unified whole.
Yeah, as far as the promotion goes, how did that fare out with you? Because this was back in 1985, mind you.
Well, when you mean promotion, you mean in terms of getting a soundtrack out and everything?
Yes.
Well, at the time, Tom Causey, who owns Saturn Records, came to me, and he's a Pittsburgh boy, and he wanted to put the release out, and we did. I honestly don't know how well it did. With these small... The movie, of course, did not do great when it first came out, so by extension, the soundtrack didn't either. But over the years, it's continued to play. I hear it on the radio and on channels that are devoted to genre movies, and then La La Land has put it out twice now, and the guys down at Waxwork in New Orleans have put out the first LP version of it. It never got the kind of, I guess you'd say, studio system soundtrack album promotion.
Or at least recognition for it. I mean, it's there, but they didn't exactly took the bait, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And so, there weren't big trade ads. It's hung around, so I ain't complaining.
Yeah, it's a little bit hypocritical because back then they'll tear down horror films or even other genre films that were really, really good. But until you fast forward now, it's like they became cult classics all of a sudden.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there was the occasional Tubular Bells that would come out, or Goldsmith score for Dick Donner's movie about Damien. What was that called? I forget. And there were the occasional big-time scores that would be associated with horror movies, The Exorcist, or that kind of thing. But the genre movies, you're right. They were kind of second-class citizens, and I think the scores were too.
And in a way, the actual score, in some aspects, it's almost like it's too underrated to really appreciate it because it's there, you hear it, but the only thing they really want is like, for example, Michael Jackson Thriller.
Yeah.
Something like that, and of the new era. And I know I said this before.
Well, that's it, but there have been so many really good composers working in the genre. I mean, Joe LaDuca working with Sam Raimi, and Chris Young working with so many greats, including George once. And, there are a lot of first-rate musicians that have played in this territory. Recently, there's been more respect given the genre. I mean, we are now living in the world of fantasy and horror on television and in movies, quite a bit different. I mean, I'm talking, we're all talking big-time stuff now. So I think the pendulum has swung a little bit, are respecting it a little bit more than they did back then.
Yeah, slowly but surely. But when it comes to this film, were you actually a little hesitant since it didn't get great reviews at the time? And did you feel this will kind of hurt your career a little bit, even though it has George Romero's name on it, though?
No, not really, Mike. Because you see, here's the thing: I didn't set out to create a career as a film composer. I kind of almost fell into it by accident, and that was because of working with George. Back in the day when we were in the Berg and we were doing things, it was really independent filmmaking. I mean, we put together crews of people, and basically the only thing that we had in terms of real movie-making skills was our enthusiasm. We just, people learned by doing. And so I happened to be the guy with a piano. So when it came to, we're going to need some music for this, who do we call? Well, Harrison's got a piano. So that's how I kind of fell into it. I was very lucky that that break enabled me to work in that field for a while. I did George's scores. I did the scores for Tales from the Dark Side television series for some of them, music for my own film like Tales from the Dark Side, a Paramount movie. It allowed me to get into a career that I really had never anticipated. So I don't feel that the lack of immediate success of Day of the Dead hurt me at all. I really wasn't out here in Hollywood trying to get an agent and try to get onto big film or anything like that. I was very happy to play in this little sandbox with people I knew because I was also developing my writing and directing career at the same time. I look back on that time very fondly, and I'm thrilled when people like Waxwork and La La Land come along and say, we want to re-release this, and then we have screenings and the fans show up and everything. I mean, it's terrific. No, I don't think it hurt me at all.
Well, do you think a little bit they should go back to the old ways when making scores or anything film related into this generation? Because it seems when you look back then, at that time, yeah, it was primitive. It was still a new age at that time as far as technology goes. Trying to get it out there, it was very difficult at the time. Now it's kind of a lot more easier, a little bit more at ease at the time when it comes to technology. But as far as popularity goes, not as great. It's just all about the big bucks rather than the actual quality of the film and the quality of the soundtrack.
Well, it's kind of a complicated issue you're raising there. I think since technology has made it so much easier in many ways to create elaborate scores, there's a tendency, I think, not to take it maybe as seriously. Obviously, if you're dealing with the big movies, there's a great deal of money and resources thrown at that. But what really kind of is lacking that I see right now is sort of the collaboration between the filmmaker and the composer. You know, I've always felt that music is as much a story element as the cinematography or the dialogue. And if it's done properly, it can convey so many things that the filmmaker is trying to say with the movie in terms of emotional context, even plot devices and things like that. My experience with George taught me that the collaboration between the director or the filmmaker and the composer could really be productive. It could really be special. And there have been other examples of this throughout history. I mean, the obvious ones are Spielberg and Williams, or Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann, you know, those kinds of relationships. But look at the scores that come out of those things. The reason is the composer and the filmmaker are collaborating on the story, and the composer is basically delivering to the filmmaker a vision musically of what the movie is about. A lot of times what happens now is it's an afterthought, and that's the problem.
Yeah, there's like no communications. A lot of times it would be one specific person, like let's say for example a director and or writer that just wants to do it their own way, their own direction, and kind of force it on the other person. Oh, okay, fine, because of time restraints and money restraints, and then just end up having a bad product in the end.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of directors I've encountered don't have a musical background. They don't have a lot of intuitive feeling about what should be done. Many of them would say, well, just play it for me, I'll know it when I like it. But it's like anything. If you don't know about it, you can educate yourself about it, and rather than kind of consider it after the fact or just some kind of undertone, you wouldn't not engage your cinematographer in shooting it. You should engage your composer in the same way, I think.
Well, go ahead and plug in anything that you like, any projects you're involved in, or any more advice you'd like to give.
Well, I mean, anybody that's interested in doing the compositions, doing movie music, I mean, I'm almost kind of jealous because, as I said, the technology enables people now to do so much more elaborate things than I was able to do, unless you had money. I think if anybody is interested in doing it, then I would encourage them just to align themselves with filmmakers, get to know filmmakers, spend time with them, and work with them that way. You know, there's so many marvelous opportunities now for all kinds of projects to be made, and I would, not turn down any work. Just do anything that comes along, because every one of those experiences will be a learning experience.
Well, there you go. And this is the Day of the Dead special, Behind the Screams, with composer John Harrison.